Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Play Chrono Trigger. I am MegaFreak400, and in this episode, we're going to do the Rainbow Shell side quest. Now, if you remember, Toma was talking about finding the Rainbow Shell, and he says he has a lead on the Rainbow Shell, but there's something odd going on, so he wants us to hang out to his pop, which is actually alcohol. I think it's sake in the Japanese version. But anyway, he wants a support on his grave if he dies. So let's assume he dies because he's probably gonna die anyway, whether or not he dies gruesomely or just average death. So let's go to the future and pour it on his grave and see what he has to say. And as you see, there's a gravestone up in the left-hand corner, which is the West Cape. I'm not sure if it's the same West Cape from the Kingdom of Zeal, but whether or not it is, it doesn't matter. And before you pour it on there, grab speed tab behind his grave. Definitely want to grab that. Now then, the great adventurer Toma Levine rests here. Okay, let's go pour his pop on his grave. That's kind of an interesting animation. Okay then, so let's see if anything happens. Oh look, it's Toma's ghost. Okay man, long time no see. I've located the Rainbow Shell. To the northwest of this cape is a large island called the Giant's Claw. You can find the shell there. Okay, so there's a place called the Giant's Claw, which he shows you in the past because it doesn't exist in the present. It doesn't exist in 1000 AD, so you have to go back to 800 AD. But he shows you the cutscene because to him, that's where he's lived, even though technically we're seeing him in 1000 AD. Anyway, let's go to that place and hopefully we'll find the Rainbow Shell. And yeah, it seems like Tomo knows you like your best friends, but you could have talked to him quite a bit because he is in various bars throughout the Middle Ages, and this music sounds familiar. These holes, what if I jumped into them on purpose? Yes, I'll start back at the beginning, and kaboom! No, so let's oh wait, no, this little place looks familiar. This is the Tyranno Lair. Yeah, this is the Tyranno Lair. So yeah, this is the Toronto Lair. It was buried beneath the earth, and now it's not. And it gets buried again after in 1000 AD, supposedly. So yeah, this is the Tyranno Lair. We got dinosaurs here, and basically you want to go find the Rainbow Shell. Now, if you didn't get any of the egg chests, there's a few egg chests that you can re-get in this area if you didn't get them when you first went through the Tyranno Lair, which is kind of an interesting thing. It's a little bit nice. It's I don't know. I don't think this is the only place that isn't destroyed, because of course Kingdom of Zeal was destroyed as well. But they do allow you to get some of these chests, which is kind of odd because most of them aren't going to be really helpful at this point. Due to the fact that something like that, I don't know if any of the helms you can get here, but I guess the regular items would be helpful, but the helms, you probably have stronger helms at this point in the game. So what to talk about? Well, I recently beat for the first time because, again, I'm a lazy gamer in the extent that I have a lot of games and I play them, but I finish them a little bit, but sometimes I'll put games off and I'll never finish them. But eventually, I did finish Super Metroid. A friend had the cartridge, and technically I have the cartridge too, but I started just sitting down playing it, and I got into it, and I beat it. It's a really great game, and the thing about Super Metroid is, and I've ranted before about it came and learned Magic Shield, which allows you to, I think, just up defensive magic for some of your people. And over here, you'll see this is an escape route later on, so this area is not really important at the moment. Yeah, I did a lot of trying to figure out where to start at this point. But yeah, I've always not really complained, but I've ranted about how non-linear games can be bad because especially in not necessarily in 3D but in 2D, because they can be confusing about where to go. And with Super Metroid has that, but there's something about the game. I don't know whether it's the artwork and music and just the overall atmosphere, or the fact that it's just got good gameplay that even when there's a lot of moments where you won't know where to go, and you'll have to do a random bombing, and it's somewhat you know, you think it'd be frustrating trying to figure out where to go because it's quite confusing, but it's not frustrating. That's a sign of a good game. If gameplay that could be frustrating in other aspects isn't, that's a sign of a good game. Now, for the original Metroid, for the NES, that game is, I think personally, is horrible. And I think every problem it has, Super Metroid corrected. So Super Metroid is a really great game. Definitely worthy of the praise it gets. One thing that's been upsetting me lately, though, is Metroid Other M is coming out, and that's not entirely true, but from what I've seen, there's half of the people are complaining about the game not being we just killed a kitten. Great job, K-Man. You just killed a kitten. Half the people are complaining about it not being enough like Metroid Prime, and people are complaining about it not being like Super Metroid, and they're comparing it, and I've done a whole rant on comparing games before, not necessarily to the extent of, it affects reviews, it affects your aspect of the game, like, in, the main thing, I had a whole gigantic rant, or a discussion before, with some friends, but basically, when you compare a game, you're comparing it to what it isn't. You're not looking at it for what it is. You're looking at it at what it isn't. And that's not always a bad thing, but like in this case, they're looking at Metroid Other M. It's got aspects of both games. It looks really interesting, and I personally think it's going to be fun. And people have even said it's not a bad game. But they're comparing it to what it isn't. So they're comparing it to not being a first-person shooter and not being a 2D side-scroller. It's neither of those games. It's neither of those genres. I don't think it's all that fair to compare it. And part of the reason they're comparing it is because both those games are what people consider quintessential Metroid games. They consider Super Metroid to be like one of the best Metroid games ever, and as well as Metroid Prime being one of the best Metroid games ever. But I've heard people complaining it had too much cutscenes, not enough cutscenes. There's been, way too. And the other thing that's really, I think I've talked about this, is people saying how Samus is not isolated, and she's got people, and it's like, oh no, she should be isolated. That keeps the effect. I don't get where people got this idea, because when the game was first made for SNES and NES, which is basically where it was for a while until Metroid Prime, it was on the SNES and NES, and for the most part, while there were a few games that had story, a lot of platformers didn't have a story and character development for the most part. There are a few maybe, but they didn't have that much story and character development, and people act like, oh, okay, that means that Samus is this isolated person, which I guess in terms of the gameplay, okay, maybe. Then Metroid Prime came out, and it still had the isolated thing, even though later on they had characters occasionally. And Metroid Fusion had some character development of probably the most of Samus, and yet people still have it in their head that Samus is this isolated person. And, okay, sure she is, but we can't have a story on the why. And even if she was, we can't have backstory on the why she's isolated. I mean, maybe she is isolated, but maybe there's more of a reason why she's become isolated. You have the whole Chozo background. But honestly, I want background on Samus, personally. I think people get too obsessed, and that's a blue rock that can be used for another tech. But I think people get too obsessed on the ideal of what they want, and they get blinded by that ideal, and that affects their opinion negatively. A lot of times, it's like, and the other thing I noticed, though, is like first games in the series, and by first games I mean the first game made in a series, and they didn't do it first. Like Super Mario 64 is the first 3D Mario game, and Super Mario Bros. Is the first Mario game. And for the most part, and there are probably exceptions, and I'm sure people will tell me exceptions, but no one really complains about first games. No one ever really says, there might be some apprehension at first saying, hey, I don't know if this will be good, but eventually people tend to like it for the most part. I know Metroid Prime, there was apprehension with it, but now everyone praises Metroid Prime. So a lot of first games, while there's a few complaints for the most part, especially because like the early games like NES had a lot of glitches, for the most part people don't complain about it that much. And the Frenzy Band is basically like the Rage Band, except for it has a higher counterattack rate, so it's a really good item. It's probably one of the best equips in the game. But yeah, people complain about I mean, like Zelda, the original Zelda, again, the original Metroid. People praise the original Metroid. There are so many bad glitches in there, in my opinion. There are so many bad glitches, and these are the rebels. Definitely kill these guys because they'll give you high tech, as they did in the Mountain of Woe. But there are so many glitches in that game, and so many problems. Yet people still, there are a lot of people I've seen review sites say it one of the best Metroid games. And that baffles me. Is it just because it's the first and you don't want to offend the first? And then people take the first game and compare it to the rest of the series. It's like that. I don't. That's why I think people should try and compare less and just examine it for what it is. Not that doesn't mean it has to be positive, but like, instead of saying it's not a first-person shooter, what is it about the gameplay that makes it good or bad? Comparing can be useful and it should be used, but I think people use it way too much and they get too stuck on it not being like the first game instead of saying, oh, this is what it improved upon. I think a lot of times people get stuck on it, especially with certain genres in certain games like Ocarina of Time, and I think the Metroid franchise as well. That's almost all the time we have. This is where Kino was imprisoned, and yeah, let's go up and down the stairs several times. So next time we will be heading out, hopefully finding the rainbow shell. So this has been Mega Freak 400, and I am reminding you that an apple a day keeps Freddy Krueger away.